The barrel of the Glock 17 gleamed under the harsh Texas sun, pointed steadily at the center of Elena Voss's chest. She did not tremble. She did not scream. She simply tightened her grip on the steering wheel, her dark eyes locking onto the sweaty, flushed face of Officer Harlan Reed. He was smiling, a cruel, jagged grin that suggested he enjoyed this part of the job far too much. He thought she was just another terrified tourist passing through his county. He thought the FBI credentials resting on the dashboard were a desperate lie, a fake prop bought online. He had no idea that a silent alarm had been triggered the moment his lights flashed. He had no idea that his entire world would shatter with a single phone call. The asphalt of Interstate 10 shimmered in the oppressive heat, creating mirages of water that vanished as soon as the tires of the black Chevrolet Tahoe rolled over them. Inside the vehicle, the air conditioning was fighting a losing battle against the heavy humidity of Cedar Ridge, a sprawling county that sat like a dusty thumbprint on the map of East Texas. Elena Voss adjusted her sunglasses, her gaze flicking between the road ahead and the rearview mirror. She was not supposed to be here. At least that is what the official logs back in Quantico would say. Officially, Special Agent Voss was on administrative leave following a high-profile bust in Chicago that had left her with a fractured rib and a need for quiet. But Elena did not do quiet, and she certainly did not do coincidence. Her younger brother Darius had driven through Cedar Ridge on his way to a college orientation in Austin. He had called her in a panic, claiming a local deputy had seized cash from him, money he had saved for tuition, under the guise of civil asset forfeiture. Darius had not been speeding. He had not been drinking. He was just young, black, and driving a car that the deputy decided was too nice for him. When Elena looked into the incident, the report was non-existent. The money had simply evaporated. But the name on the citation Darius had managed to photograph was real. Officer Harlan Reed. Elena was not here for revenge. She was here for reconnaissance. She wanted to see if Reed was just a bad apple or if the whole tree was rotten. She had swapped her usual government-issued SUV for a rental with out-of-state plates, dressed in casual civilian clothes, a simple t-shirt and jeans, and placed a hidden 4K dash cam on the passenger seat, obscured by a box of tissues. She was cruising just under the limit. Her hands were at 10 and 2. She was the model motorist. Then she saw it, hidden behind a billboard advertising Big Earl's BBQ. The nose of a Cedar Ridge patrol cruiser poked out like a shark, sensing blood in the water. As she passed, Elena watched the cruiser in her side mirror. It did not pull out immediately. It waited, predatory and patient, before peeling onto the highway. Elena felt the familiar cold prickle at the base of her neck. She maintained her speed. The cruiser accelerated, closing the gap aggressively, riding her bumper so close she could see the officer's sunglasses reflecting her own license plate. He did not turn on his lights. She tapped the brake lightly, just enough to flash the lights, signaling him to back off. That was the trigger. Blue and red LEDs exploded in her rearview mirror, blindingly bright even in the daylight. The siren chirped once, a short, angry burst. "Here we go," Elena whispered to the empty car. She signaled right, slowing down gradually, and pulled onto the gravel shoulder. The dust cloud billowed up around the Tahoe as she came to a halt. She put the car in park, killed the engine, and rolled down all 4 windows. It was standard procedure to put an officer at ease to show you had nothing to hide. She placed her hands on the top of the steering wheel, fingers spread open. In the side mirror, she watched Officer Harlan Reed exit his vehicle. He was a mountain of a man, thick-necked and heavy-set, with a uniform that strained against his midsection. He did not walk. He strutted. His hand rested casually yet possessively on the grip of his service weapon. He did not approach the window immediately. He stopped at the rear of her car, touching the trunk, a tactical move to leave fingerprints and ensure the trunk was latched, but he did it with a heavy slap that reverberated through the chassis. Elena took a deep breath. She controlled her heart rate, forcing it to remain steady. She was a woman who had stared down cartel lieutenants and negotiated with domestic terrorists. A small-town bully should not have been a blip on her radar, but out here on this lonely stretch of road where cell service was spotty and the trees grew thick, a badge like Reed's was a license to do whatever he wanted. Reed reached the driver's side window. He did not say hello. He did not ask for license and registration. He leaned down, chewing on a toothpick, and let his mirrored shades scan the interior of the car. "You know how fast you were going, darling," Reed drawled, his voice thick with false politeness that barely masked the aggression underneath. "I was going under the limit, officer," Elena replied, her voice level and calm. "The limit is higher." Reed chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Is that what that fancy rental tells you?" "My radar clocked you at a higher speed. That is reckless driving in a construction zone." "There are no construction signs for miles," Elena countered, keeping her hands visible. Reed's smile vanished. The shift in his demeanor was instant and violent. The playful cat was gone. The wolf had arrived. He spat the toothpick onto the ground. "Are you calling me a liar, girl?" "I am stating a fact, officer, and I would appreciate it if you did not address me as girl." Reed leaned in closer, his face inches from the open window. Elena could smell stale coffee and chewing tobacco. "I will address you however I see fit. You are in Cedar Ridge now. We do not care how you do things in—" He glanced at the rental plates. "Illinois, step out of the car." "Am I under arrest?" Elena asked, not moving. "I said step out of the car." Reed roared, his hand unsnapping the retention strap of his holster. Elena knew the law better than he ever would. She knew she had the right to refuse until he provided a lawful order based on probable cause. But she also knew that men like Reed did not care about the law. They cared about dominance. If she refused, he would drag her out through the window, and she needed him on camera doing exactly what he was about to do. "Okay," Elena said softly. "I am unbuckling my seatbelt. I am stepping out." She moved slowly, deliberately. She unclicked the belt. She opened the door. As she stepped onto the hot gravel, the heat hit her like a physical blow. Reed did not step back to give her space. He crowded her, using his size to intimidate. He was towering over her. "Turn around, hands on the hood," Reed barked. "Officer, what is the reason for this stop?" Elena asked, turning but keeping her head turned toward him. "Speeding is a citation, not an arrestable offense in this state unless it is over the limit." "I smell marijuana," Reed lied smoothly. "That gives me probable cause to search the vehicle and your person. Now turn around before I help you turn around." Elena's blood ran cold. She had never smoked in her life. It was the oldest trick in the dirty cop playbook. He was manufacturing a reason to tear her car apart. Find the cash he assumed she had? Or worse, plant something. She turned and placed her hands on the hot metal of the hood. She felt Reed's heavy hands patting her down. Rough, intrusive, searching for more than just weapons. He lingered too long near her pockets. He was enjoying the power. "You got anything that would stick me? Needles, guns, knives?" "No," Elena said through gritted teeth. "What about that purse?" Reed gestured to her bag sitting on the passenger seat. "My identification is in there," Elena said, "and my badge." Reed froze. The pat-down stopped. He stepped back, a look of genuine confusion crossing his face, followed quickly by amusement. "Your badge!" He laughed, a loud barking sound that echoed off the trees. "What are you, a mall cop? Security guard at the Gap?" "I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation," Elena said, turning to face him. Her voice dropped an octave, losing the scared motorist act and adopting the steel of a federal agent. "And you are making a very serious mistake, Officer Reed." For a second, silence hung heavy in the air. Reed looked at her, really looked at her, and then he doubled over laughing. He laughed so hard he had to brace his hands on his belt. "FBI? Oh, that is rich. That is rich. You hear that, world? She is a Fed." He wiped a tear from his eye. "Honey, you ain't no Fed. You are a liar. And in Texas, lying to a peace officer is a crime." "Check the credentials in the bag," Elena said coldly. "Call it in." Reed's face hardened. The amusement evaporated. He was done playing. "I do not need to check your fake ID," he spat. He stepped forward, his hand dropping to his gun. "You are under arrest for impersonating an officer, resisting arrest, and possession of a controlled substance. I am going to tow this car, and I am going to lock you up in a cell so dark you will forget what the sun looks like." Elena saw the shift in his shoulder muscle. It was a tell she had seen a dozen times in training simulations. He was about to get physical. "I am reaching for my credentials," Elena said, moving her hand toward the open window. "Do not you move!" Reed screamed. "I am showing you my identification," Elena insisted, her hand inching toward the bag. Instinct of a man who had never been told no. He drew his weapon. The motion was fast, practiced. The black metal cleared the holster and leveled at Elena's chest. "I said freeze!" he screamed, his finger hovering on the trigger. "Get on the ground now, face down in the dirt." Elena froze. She raised her hands slowly, palms out. The dashcam inside the car was capturing everything. The angle of the gun, the rage in his face, the fact that he was threatening deadly force against an unarmed woman who had identified herself as a federal agent. "Officer Reed," Elena said, her voice eerily calm. "Look at the windshield. Look at the device on the dash." Reed glanced briefly at the small black camera lens staring back at him. He sneered. "Dash cam?" he scoffed. "My word against yours? And guess what? My dash cam is malfunctioning today. Yours will probably get lost in the evidence locker. Now get on the ground. He took a step forward, jamming the barrel of the gun toward her face. Elena did not drop. She looked past the gun, past the uniform, directly into his eyes. You have made a grave error, she whispered. And then she smiled. It was not a smile of submission. It was the smile of a trap snapping shut. The smile unnerved Reed more than a scream would have. He blinked, sweat dripping from his brow into his eyes, stinging them. Why was she not crying? Why was she not begging for her life? He had pulled this gun on a dozen people before. Travelers, teenagers, locals who looked at him wrong. They always crumbled. They always broke. But Elena Voss stood like a statue carved from obsidian. I am going to count to 3, Reed shouted, his voice cracking slightly. 1, Officer Reed, Elena said, her voice cutting through the humid air. My badge number is 894 Alpha Kilo. I am the lead investigator for the DOJ Task Force on Police Corruption in the Southern District. 2, Reed yelled, stepping closer. He was feet away now. Shut your mouth! At this moment, Elena continued, speaking faster but with perfect clarity. A silent distress beacon in my vehicle has been active. My team is currently tracking my GPS location. 3! Reed lunged. He did not shoot. He was not ready to commit murder in broad daylight. Not yet. But he pistol-whipped the air, aiming to strike her with the heavy barrel of the Glock to force her down. Elena moved. It was not the clumsy movement of a civilian. It was the fluid, explosive motion of a Krav Maga expert. She ducked under the swinging gun, her left hand swatting his wrist outward, while her right hand drove a palm heel strike into his solar plexus. Reed gasped, the air leaving his lungs in a wheezing rush. He stumbled back, his boots slipping on the loose gravel. He did not drop the gun, but his aim went wild, pointing toward the sky. You bitch! He gasped, recovering his balance. He raised the gun again, his eyes wide with murderous intent. He was humiliated. He had just been struck by a suspect. In his mind, the narrative had just shifted from arrest to justified use of deadly force. Drop the weapon, Elena commanded. She had not drawn her own gun. It was ankle-holstered and hard to reach, but she stood in a combat stance. You are dead, Reed screamed. You are dead. He leveled the gun. Screech! The sound came from everywhere at once. It was the sound of rubber burning against asphalt, of heavy engines roaring to their red lines. Reed flinched, his eyes darting to the highway. From the north, a convoy of 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans was tearing down the road, driving on the wrong side of the highway to bypass traffic. From the south, a helicopter crested the tree line, banking hard. The letters FBI emblazoned in white across its dark blue fuselage. The wind from the rotor wash hit them instantly, kicking up a storm of dust and grit. Reed froze. His brain could not process the sudden shift in reality. 1 second he was the king of the road, about to punish a defiant woman. The next he was standing in the center of a hurricane. The lead Suburban drifted sideways, tires screaming, and slammed to a halt yards away. The doors flew open before the wheels had even stopped spinning. Men and women in full tactical gear poured out. They did not look like local cops. They moved with the terrifying precision of a machine. Their rifles, Daniel Defense MK-18 SBRs, snapped up. Dozens of laser sights painted Reed's chest with dancing red dots. Federal agents, drop the weapon. Drop it now. The voice was amplified by a loudspeaker booming from the lead vehicle. Reed looked at the gun in his hand. He looked at Elena. She had not moved. She was simply watching him now, with that same calm expression on her face. I told you, she said, her voice barely audible over the roar of the helicopter hovering directly overhead. Reed's hands began to shake. The reality of the situation crashed down on him. This was not a fake badge. This was not a lie. He had just drawn a service weapon on a federal agent, assaulted her, and threatened to kill her, all while her entire team was listening. I was, Reed stammered, lowering the gun. Face down. Do it now, or we will fire. The voice from the loudspeaker roared. Reed dropped the Glock. It hit the gravel with a dull thud. He fell to his knees, his hands going up in the air, his face draining of color until he looked like a ghost. Elena walked over to him. She did not look triumphant. She looked disappointed. She kicked his gun away, sending it skittering under his own patrol car. Get on your stomach, Reed, she said quietly. He complied, lying flat in the dust, his cheek pressed against the sharp rocks. A team of agents swarmed him. Zip ties were cinched tight around his wrists, much tighter than necessary. Someone ripped the mirrored sunglasses off his face and tossed them into the ditch. One of the tactical agents, a tall man with a beard named Special Agent Preston Vale, Elena's partner, hauled Reed up by his armpits. "You have the right to remain silent," Vale growled into Reed's ear, "but I highly suggest you start crying. It might help your case with the jury. Actually, no, it will not." Elena walked past Reed, straight to her rental car. She reached into the passenger seat, grabbed her purse, and pulled out the gold badge and leather wallet. She walked back to where Reed was being held. She held the badge up inches from his sweating, terrified face. "Take a good look, Harlan," she said. "Is it fake?" Reed could not speak. He just shook his head weakly, tears mixing with the dust on his face. "Get him out of my sight," Elena ordered. As they dragged him toward one of the black SUVs, the radio in Reed's abandoned patrol car crackled to life. It was the local dispatcher. Unit 4 Alpha, Sheriff is asking for your 20. He says to let the girl go if she has out-of-state plates. Do not need the heat." Elena leaned into the patrol car, grabbed the mic, and keyed it. "This is Special Agent Elena Voss of the FBI, she said into the radio, her voice broadcasting to every scanner in the county. "Unit 4 Alpha is currently in federal custody, and tell the sheriff to put a pot of coffee on. We are coming for him next." She dropped the mic. It dangled by its cord, swaying back and forth like a pendulum, counting down the end of an era for Cedar Ridge. The Cedar Ridge police station was a relic of the 1970s. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry wasps, and the smell of stale donuts and desperation. Usually it was a place of loud voices and slamming doors, where the locals were processed and intimidated. Today, it was silent. The lobby was filled not with deputies, but with men in suits. The FBI had seized the building, boxes of files were being carted out, computers were being bagged as evidence. The local deputies stood in the parking lot, stripped of their weapons, watching in stunned silence as their kingdom was dismantled brick by brick. In Interrogation Room B, Harlan Reed sat handcuffed to a metal table. The arrogance that had defined him on the highway was gone. He looked small. He was slouching, his eyes darting around the room, looking for a friendly face. There were none. The door opened. Elena Voss walked in, holding a thick file folder. She did not sit down. She tossed the file onto the table. It landed with a heavy thump. "Water," Elena offered. Reed looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "Please," Elena nodded. She did not move to get any. "I am sure you were thirsty when you left those 2 college kids handcuffed in the back of your car in high heat. Remember them? The Johnson brothers?" Reed swallowed hard. That was a misunderstanding. The AC malfunctioned." "Is that right?" Elena opened the file. She pulled out a photo. It was a picture of Reed standing next to a brand new fishing boat. "Nice boat, Harlan. Bought it cash after you seized cash from a contractor traveling to Houston." "We checked the logs. That money never made it to the evidence locker." "I have a right to a lawyer," Reed croaked. "You do," Elena agreed. "And he is on his way. But here is the thing, Harlan. Your lawyer is going to tell you to shut up, and that is good advice. But by the time he gets here, I am going to play a recording for the United States Attorney." She pulled a small digital recorder from her pocket and placed it on the table. "What recording?" Reed whispered. "The one from your patrol car," Elena said. "See, we did not just seize the station. We seized the cloud server where your dash cam footage uploads automatically. You said it was malfunctioning. It was not. You just covered the lens with tape, but the audio was crystal clear." Reed went pale. "I listened to your stops," Elena said, leaning in. "The racial slurs, the threats, the sounds of you hitting people who were already cuffed. But the most interesting part, the phone call you made before you pulled me over." Reed's eyes widened. He shook his head frantically. No. "You called Sheriff Vance Briggs," Elena said, "and you said, and I quote, 'I got a target, solo female. Looks like she has got money. I am going to shake the tree and see what falls out. Cut me in for 20%. Elena let the words hang in the air. "That is conspiracy to commit robbery, Harlan, under color of law. That is a federal RICO charge. That is a minimum. And since you used a firearm during the commission of a crime, add another mandatory consecutive." "I was just following orders," he blubbered. "I was just following orders." "The sheriff, he makes us do it. If we do not bring in cash, he cuts our shifts. He threatens our families." Elena's expression did not change. She had heard this song before. The rats always turn on each other when the ship starts sinking. "You want a deal, Harlan?" Reed nodded frantically. Yes, I will tell you everything. I will give you Briggs. I will give you the judge. Just do not put me in general population. Please, I am a cop. They will kill me in there." Elena pulled a chair out and sat down. She looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You stopped being a cop a long time ago," she said. "Now you are just a witness. Start talking from the beginning, and if you lie to me even once, I walk out that door and I leave you to the wolves." Reed took a shaking breath. "It started with the highway interdiction program." As Reed began to spill the secrets of Cedar Ridge, Elena looked at the two-way mirror. She knew Vale was behind it, recording everything. The hard karma was not just Reed going to jail. It was Reed destroying his own brotherhood, ensuring that everyone he had ever worked with would hate him. He was burning his own world to the ground to save his skin, and Elena was there to hand him the matches. Sheriff Vance Briggs sat on the porch of his 3-story ranch house, a glass of expensive bourbon in his hand. The ice clinked softly as he swirled it, watching the sun dip below the horizon of his property. It was a sprawling estate, acres of prime Texas grazing land stocked with pedigree cattle and quarter horses. It was an impressive accumulation of wealth for a public servant earning a modest salary. Briggs was a man who believed in the absolute authority of the badge. He had run Cedar Ridge like a feudal lord. He decided who did business, who went to jail, and who got a pass. He had insulated himself with a layer of loyal deputies like Harlan Reed, blunt instruments who did the dirty work, while Briggs kept his hands clean and his pockets full. But tonight the air felt different. His phone had been silent. Usually it buzzed nonstop with check-ins from patrol, updates from dispatch, or calls from the local judge asking for favors. He had tried calling the station. No answer. He had tried calling Reed, straight to voicemail. A knot of unease tightened in his gut. He took a heavy sip of bourbon. "Probably just the storm knocking out the towers," he muttered to himself, eyeing the dark clouds gathering in the east. But it was not a storm. The silence of the evening was shattered not by thunder, but by the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of rotors. Briggs stood up, squinting into the twilight. A helicopter was approaching, flying low and fast, hugging the tree line to stay below the radar. Literally. At the same moment, the heavy iron gates at the end of his driveway exploded inward. He watched in horror as a convoy of armored vehicles bearing the bright yellow letters FBI surged onto his property. They did not stop at the house. They fanned out, driving over his manicured lawns, smashing through his white picket fences. They were encircling him. "What in the hell?" Briggs gasped. He turned to run back inside, his mind racing to the wall safe in his study where the ledger was kept, the book that detailed every bribe, every seizure, every payoff. He slammed the front door and locked it. He scrambled down the hallway, his breathing ragged. He burst into his study, swept a painting of a cowboy aside, and spun the dial on the safe. Left, right, left, crash. The front door did not just open, it was battered off its hinges with a ram. "Federal agents, search warrant, clear the rooms." Briggs's fingers fumbled. He could not get the combination right. He could hear boots, dozens of them, thundering on his hardwood floors. They were sweeping the house with the efficiency of a swarm of locusts. "Kitchen clear, upstairs clear." "Basement secure." Briggs abandoned the safe. He grabbed a lighter from his desk and tried to torch the papers sitting in his inbox. Receipts for wire transfers to the Cayman Islands. "Sheriff Briggs," the voice came from the doorway. Briggs spun around, the lighter flickering in his shaking hand. Standing there was a woman he did not recognize. She was dressed in a tactical vest over civilian clothes, her FBI badge hanging around her neck. Elena Voss looked at him, not with fear, but with the cold, analytical gaze of an exterminator looking at a particularly large cockroach. "We will trigger if you light that, and I would hate for you to suffocate before your trial." Briggs stared at her. He looked at the agents filling the hallway. The realization hit him like a physical punch. It was over. The kingdom had fallen. Who gave me up?" Briggs rasped, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. "Was it the judge? Was it Deputy Reed?" Elena stepped into the room, kicking the doorstop so the door stayed wide open. "It was your favorite soldier," she said, a small, icy smile playing on her lips. "Harlan Reed. He sang, Vance. He sang an entire opera about you. He told us about the travelers you targeted. He told us about the evidence locker skimming. He even told us about the retirement fund buried under the floorboards of your hunting cabin." Briggs's face turned a violent shade of purple. "Reed? That gutless—" "I made him. I own him." "Not anymore," Elena said. "Now he belongs to the Bureau of Prisons, and so do you." "You cannot prove anything," Briggs roared, trying to summon the bluster that had served him for decades. "I am the law in this county. I demand to call the governor." "The governor is currently holding a press conference," Elena said, checking her watch. He is announcing the appointment of an interim sheriff and a special prosecutor to investigate corruption in Cedar Ridge. He is distancing himself from you so fast he is leaving skid marks." She pulled a pair of handcuffs from her belt. They were standard issue, steel and cold. "Turn around, Vance!" Briggs deflated. The fight left him. He turned around slowly, his shoulders slumping. Elena clicked the cuffs onto his wrists. They felt tighter than he remembered. He had not worn a pair. He was used to putting them on others. "You have the right to remain silent," Elena recited as she marched him out of his study, past the gaping hole where his front door used to be. Outside, the scene was chaotic. Agents were carrying boxes out of his house. Others were leading his prize horses out of the stables, seizing assets bought with stolen money. News crews were already gathering at the perimeter of the property, their cameras zooming in as the King of Cedar Ridge was led down his porch steps in irons. As Elena pushed him toward the back of an SUV, Briggs stopped. He looked at her. "Reed," he spat. "Tell Reed he is a dead man." Elena leaned in close. "You can tell him yourself. You are going to the same holding facility tonight. I made sure you have adjoining cells. You two have a lot of catching up to do." She slammed the door on him. As the car pulled away, Elena watched the flashing lights illuminate the Texas night. The snake's head had been cut off, but the body was still thrashing. The federal courthouse in Houston was a stark contrast to the dusty wood-paneled room where Harlan Reed was used to testifying. This room was cold, modern, and intimidating. The seal of the United States hung high above the judge's bench, a reminder of the weight of the hammer that was about to fall. Reed sat at the defense table. He looked different. He had lost weight, mostly from stress and the terrible food in protective custody. His skin was pasty, having not seen the sun. He was jittery. His leg bounced uncontrollably under the table. Today was sentencing. He had taken the plea deal. It was the only way out. He had testified against Sheriff Vance Briggs. He had outlined the entire scheme, how they profiled out-of-state cars, how they planted drugs, how they split the cash. His testimony was devastating. Briggs had been convicted on counts of racketeering, wire fraud, and deprivation of civil rights. The king was looking at life without parole. Reed, however, expected mercy. He was the star witness. He was the one who blew the lid off. His lawyer, a court-appointed public defender named Mr. Barrett, had assured him that his cooperation would move mountains with the judge. "Just look remorseful," Barrett whispered to him. "Cry if you can." "I do not have to pretend," Reed whispered back. He was terrified. The bailiff announced the entrance of the judge. "All rise for the Honorable Justice Kira Reed." Judge Kira Reed swept into the room. She was a stern woman with a reputation for detesting public corruption. She took her seat and adjusted her glasses, looking down at Reed over a stack of files. "Be seated," she commanded. The prosecutor, a sharp-suited man from the Department of Justice, stood up. "Your Honor," he began, "the government acknowledges the defendant's substantial assistance in the prosecution of Sheriff Briggs. Without Mr. Reed, dismantling this corruption ring would have been significantly more difficult. Therefore, we are recommending a downward departure from the guidelines. We suggest a sentence." Reed let out a breath he did not know he was holding. With good behavior, federal programs, and time served, he could be out sooner. He could still have a life. It was not freedom, but it was survivable. Judge Kira Reed listened, her face unreadable. She turned to Reed. "Mr. Reed, do you have anything to say before I pass sentence?" Reed stood up. His hands were shaking. He looked at the gallery. It was packed. Elena Voss was there, sitting in the back row, watching him with that same unyielding expression. Next to her was a young black man Reed did not recognize, Elena's brother Darius. And behind them were dozens of other people Reed recognized. The contractor whose truck he had seized, the mother whose son he had arrested on false charges to meet a quota, the college students he had terrorized on the roadside. They were all staring at him. I am sorry, Your Honor," Reed stammered. "I got caught up in a bad situation. The sheriff, he pressured us. I just wanted to do my job. I am a good man. I cooperated. I did the right thing in the end." He sat down, wiping sweat from his upper lip. Judge Kira Reed shuffled her papers. "Prosecution has recommended they cite your cooperation as a mitigating factor, and it is true. You helped catch a bigger fish. Dashcam footage of your stop with Agent Voss. I have listened to the audio of you laughing as you terrorized citizens who looked to you for protection. You did not just follow orders, Mr. Reed. You reveled in them. You enjoyed the power. You treated the Constitution of the United States like a suggestion." Reed felt a cold pit open in his stomach. This was not going according to script. You asked for leniency because you turned on your co-conspirators, Cedar Ridge said, but you only did so when you were caught. That is not morality. That is self-preservation. You betrayed the public trust in the most vile way possible. A badge is a symbol of faith. You turned it into a weapon of extortion. She looked at the prosecutor. The court rejects the plea agreement sentencing recommendation. A gasp went through the room. Reed's lawyer shot up. Your Honor, the precedent for cooperation. Sit down, counselor, Cedar Ridge snapped. She turned her gaze back to Reed, who was now trembling violently. Harlan Reed, for the crimes of conspiracy to deprive civil rights, armed robbery under color of law, and obstruction of justice, I hereby sentence you to years in federal prison. Reed's knees gave out. He collapsed into his chair. He would be an old man when he got out. His life was over. Furthermore, the judge added, delivering the final blow, I am recommending that you serve your sentence at USP Beaumont. Reed let out a strangled cry. USP Beaumont. It was known as Bloody Beaumont. It was a high-security penitentiary. It was not the white-collar camp he had hoped for. It was a place where ex-cops had a life expectancy measured in days unless they stayed in solitary confinement for the rest of their lives. And Mr. Reed, Judge Cedar Ridge said, gathering her robes, since you have been stripped of your pension to pay restitution to your victims, I am ordering that your assets be liquidated immediately. The boat, the truck, the house, all of it goes to the people you robbed. She banged the gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. Court is adjourned. Reed was numb. 2 U.S. Marshals moved in behind him. They hauled him to his feet. He looked back at the gallery one last time. He locked eyes with Elena Voss. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply nodded, a gesture of finality. Then he looked at the young man next to her, Darius. Darius stood up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. He held it up just for a second, then crumpled it and tossed it into the aisle as Reed was dragged past. Keep the change, Darius whispered. The karma had not just hit. It had crushed him. Reed was dragged through the side door, his sobbing echoing in the hallway, while the people he had tormented walked out into the bright, free Texas sunshine. USP Beaumont was a fortress of concrete and misery rising out of the Texas swamp. It smelled of industrial disinfectant, unwashed bodies, and despair. For inmate number, formerly known as Officer Harlan Reed, it was hell on earth. Reed had been in the SHU, Special Housing Unit. Protective custody sounded like a luxury, but in reality, it was solitary confinement with a nicer name. He was locked in a small cell for most of the day. His window was a slit that looked out onto a brick wall. The silence was the worst part, or rather the lack of human conversation. The noise of the prison was constant, shouting, banging, the mechanical clank of electronic locks. But no one spoke to him. To the general population, he was a badge, a cop. If he walked into the yard, he would be stabbed before he reached the weight pile. To the guards, he was a dirty badge, a traitor who made their jobs harder by eroding public trust. They hated him more than the inmates did. On a humid day, the slot in his steel door slid open. A guard named Officer Darius peered in. Darius was young, black, and held himself with a kind of rigid professionalism Reed had mocked his entire career. Mail, Darius said, sliding a single manila envelope through the slot. Reed scrambled off his cot. Officer Darius, hey man, can I get extra rec time? My legs are cramping up in here. Darius looked at him coldly. It is Officer Darius to you, inmate. And no, regulations say 1 hour. You know the rules. You used to enforce them. The slot slammed shut. Reed stared at the door. The irony was a bitter pill that choked him every single day. He looked down at the envelope. It was from a law firm in Dallas. His heart hammered against his ribs. Maybe it was an appeal. Maybe Mr. Barrett had found a loophole. He tore it open. It was not an appeal. It was a petition for dissolution of marriage. His wife, Valeria, was filing for divorce. Reed sank onto the thin, lumpy mattress. He read the legal jargon through blurred eyes. Irreconcilable differences. Incarceration of spouse. Full custody of the children. There was a handwritten note clipped to the back. Harlan, I cannot do this. I cannot be the wife of the man on the news. The kids are getting bullied at school. They call their father a crook. We are moving to Oregon to stay with my sister. I changed our number. Do not write tease. Let them forget you. It is the only kindness you can give them now. Valeria. Reed dropped the paper. He curled into a ball on the cot, facing the concrete wall. He had lost his job. He had lost his freedom. He had lost his money. Now he had lost his blood. He let out a scream of pure, raw anguish. It echoed off the walls. Outside the door, Officer Darius did not flinch. He just kept walking his beat. He had heard it 1,000 times before. It was just the sound of a man realizing that actions have consequences. Meanwhile, in Cedar Ridge, the atmosphere was transformed. The blue wall of silence that Sheriff Vance Briggs had built was being dismantled with a sledgehammer. Elena Voss stood in the parking lot of the former sheriff's department. The sign out front was being repainted. It no longer listed Briggs's name. A new interim sheriff had been appointed by the state, a woman named Cedar Ridge, a former Texas Ranger with a reputation for being by the book and utterly humorless about corruption. Agent Voss, Sheriff Reed said, walking up to Elena. She extended a hand. I wanted to thank you before you headed back to Quantico. Elena shook her hand. Do not thank me, Sheriff. Thank the dash cam. We are cleaning house, Reed said, gesturing to the station. Fired more deputies. If they turned off their body cams even once without cause, they are gone. We are implementing a new policy, duty to intervene. If an officer sees another officer breaking the law and does not stop them, they go down too. Good, Elena said. She looked toward the highway where traffic was flowing smoothly. No predators lurking behind billboards, no speed traps designed to rob tourists. There is something else, Reed said. We found something in Briggs's safe that we think you should have. She handed Elena a small velvet box. Elena opened it. Inside was a gold pin, an FBI lapel pin, but it was not hers. It was old, tarnished. We ran the serial number, Reed said softly. It belonged to an agent named Barrett Kane. He went missing in this county. Briggs had it kept as a trophy. Elena felt a chill go down her spine. The corruption here was not just about money. It was about blood. Briggs and Reed were not just thieves. They were part of a legacy of darkness that had swallowed good people for decades. We are digging up the hunting cabin grounds, Reed said grimly. We expect to find Agent Kane and maybe others. Elena closed the box, her grip tightening until her knuckles turned white. She had stopped Reed just in time. If she had been anyone else, if she had not been trained, if she had not had backup, she would have just been another trophy in a safe. Burn it down, Sheriff, Elena said, her voice hard as flint. Burn it all down and build something decent on the ashes. The lecture hall at the FBI Academy in Quantico was filled with fresh recruits. They were young, eager, and terrified. The lights dimmed and a massive screen descended from the ceiling. Elena Voss, now the assistant special agent in charge of the Public Integrity Division, walked to the podium. She did not need notes. She had lived the lesson. Today we are going to discuss color of law violations, Elena said, her voice projecting to the back of the room. We are going to discuss what happens when the people entrusted with power decide to use it for profit. She clicked a remote. The video on the screen played. It was grainy dashcam footage from a Texas highway. The recruits watched in silence as a burly officer mocked a woman. They heard the laughter. They heard the arrogance. You know how fast you were going, darling. Then they saw the gun come out. They saw the rage on Officer Reed's face when his authority was challenged. Elena paused the video on a freeze frame of Reed's face, twisted, ugly, and sweating. This man, Elena said, pointing to the screen, is Harlan Reed. He believed he was the law. He believed he was untouchable because he wore a badge. He forgot that the badge is borrowed property. It belongs to the citizens. She clicked the remote again. The slide changed. It was a photo of Reed taken recently. He looked older. His hair was gone. His teeth were yellowing. He was chained to a hospital bed, receiving treatment for early-onset heart failure brought on by prison stress. He looked broken, hollowed out. Harlan Reed is currently serving his sentence, Elena stated. His wife left him. His children changed their last names. His pension was seized to pay restitution to the families he robbed. He will die in federal custody. The room was deadly silent. You will face people like him, Elena continued. Sometimes they will be the criminals you chase. Sometimes, tragically, they will be wearing the same uniform as you. Your loyalty is not to the Brotherhood. Your loyalty is to the Constitution. If you see a Harlan Reed, you take him down. You do not look away. After the lecture, Elena walked back to her office. Her assistant, a bright young man named Vance, was waiting for her. Ma'am, you have a visitor, Vance said. He says he is from the Texas State Board of Pardons. Elena frowned. Send him in. A man in a gray suit entered. He looked tired. Agent Voss, he said, I am here regarding the compassionate release petition for inmate Reed. His health is failing. He is asking to be released to a hospice center to die. Elena sat behind her desk. She looked at the file the man placed in front of her. She thought about the fear she felt when that gun was in her face. She thought about the missing agent, Barrett Kane, whose remains had indeed been found on Briggs's land, a murder Reed had helped cover up as a rookie. She thought of Darius and the money stolen from his tuition fund. But mostly she thought about the look in Reed's eyes when he laughed at her badge. It was a look of absolute impunity. Compassionate release requires the victim's input, the man said. Do you have an objection? Elena picked up a pen. She looked at the man. Mister. Reed had the opportunity to show compassion to dozens of people, Elena said evenly. He chose cruelty every single time. He did not just steal money. He stole faith in the system. He traumatized a generation of people in that county. She wrote a single word on the form. Denied. She slid the paper back across the desk. Tell Mr. Reed, Elena said, standing up and turning to look out the window at the American flag waving in the courtyard, that he is exactly where he belongs. He wanted to be a part of the system so badly. Now he can stay in it until the very end. The man nodded, picked up the file, and left. Elena did not watch him go. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Hey, Darius, she said when her brother answered. Yeah, I am good. Just finishing up work. I was thinking, let us go visit that college campus of yours this weekend. I hear they named the new law library after you. She smiled. The sun was setting over Quantico, casting long shadows. But for the first time in a long time, the world felt a little bit brighter. The Karma Loop was closed. The story was done. The downfall of Harlan Reed was not just about one bad traffic stop. It was about the inevitable collapse of power when it is built on fear rather than respect. Reed thought his badge was a shield that would protect him from consequences. But he learned the hard way that in the era of digital surveillance and federal oversight, the Good Old Boys Club is closed for business. He lost his freedom, his family, and his legacy, becoming nothing more than a cautionary tale played on a projector screen for future agents. Justice is not always swift, but as Elena Voss proved, when it hits hard. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It helps the algorithm share this justice with more people. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new episode of True Crime Dramas. What would you have done if you were in Elena's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.